Welcome back, Millennium Live listeners. Connor Tui here, your host of the Millennium Live podcast. Happy to bring you another episode of Millennium Live, the leadership and discovery podcast, where we explore cutting edge technologies and innovative strategies and the solutions that are driving enterprises today and enterprise success. And we've got a great guest. We are joined by Molly Presley. She is the Senior Vice President of Marketing over at Hammerspace, and she brings just a wealth of experience in product and growth marketing to the Hammerspace team and leads that marketing organization, inspiring data creators, data users to really take full advantage of a truly global data environment. So I'm lucky to be speaking with her today. Molly, it's great to have you on the podcast. And I know you have your own podcast, Data Unchained. So podcast and podcast, here we are recording. It's great to have you.
Good to be with you, Connor. Thanks. And if you're listening and you're curious to learn more details about global data environments, definitely check out Data Unchained on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
I have to pimp my podcast a little bit.
Of course. Happy to, and happy to even leave a link in the description of this one to take you over there if you're so intrigued. But today's chat is definitely focused on data and focused more on the company that you work for, Hammerspace, and its offerings. Really cool. Even the mission is to move the world to where data is a global resource and not just a localized storage. And that's awesome. I would love to know where Hammerspace, even what is a Hammerspace? I know if you're a gamer, you might be familiar with that word and that term.
Exactly.
But that if you can speak a little bit more on the true mission of Hammerspace, what it does mean for the listeners who don't know that term, and where sort of the company all came about.
Yeah, you bet. So the founding story of the name is pretty fun. If you're familiar with gaming, like Japanese anime, some of those things, you may already know what it is. But for the rest of us who aren't from those worlds so much, Hammerspace is that magical place where you can pull very large things, large objects out of a small place. So you can imagine it's Mary Poppins' purse, where she's pulling, a broomstick and a lamp and all those things out of her purse. That means her purse is a Hammerspace. Or in kind of more modern terms, in the latest Spideyverse, they talk about a hammer space, and that's where Spidey pulls his massive mallet that he uses to do battle with out of his tight little Spidey suit. So the idea is, how do you grab big things out of small places that seem physically impossible? And that there's a great analog to what we do at Hammerspace as a company, with the idea of moving data around, making data a global resource. That for ages, organizations have designed around the idea of data gravity, that data is too big to move across the size of internet pipe that you have. And we have overcome that by making it possible to make large global data sets available anywhere, even if you have what you consider a smallish internet pipe. So overcoming what you believe to be true of physical limitations of your data sets, just like what you believe to be true of what could actually fit in Spidey's pocket, is what Hammerspace does. And of course, we could talk for hours about technically how do we do this. We've created some really innovative technology to move metadata instead of data to local resources, move data in flight. There's a lot that you could dig into and how we do it. But the time couldn't be better, as organizations are trying to figure out, how do I take advantage of AI models that are remote to my data set, GPUs that are in the cloud because I don't own enough to do the processing and I want to do. The ability to move data is incredibly timely. So it's a great time to be, having this conversation and, meeting with your audience at the Millennium Alliance events this year.
Yeah, I know. And it's cool because I definitely can see the name coming from Data Unchained and where
Yes,
you might take
exactly.
that podcast and
Yes.
kind of knowing how like a Hammerspace works with data and how sort of just the company name alone ties into the technology that you're providing. Sometimes, company names could be all over the place, but this is this is sort of in line with the mission over in Hammerspace.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many technologies out there these days. New companies are popping up all over the place, and making yourself memorable is important. And we love to tell that origin story because people get it, they remember it, and they go, "Oh yeah, they're that company who does that magic thing with data sets," and they can kind of remember what we do. So it works well for marketing, and definitely one of our engineers who came up with the name. I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. You know, understood the technology really well and how tightly coupled the relevance is too. So it's impactful because it actually represents well what we do as a company.
So, and diving into, all the technology and what you provide on an enterprise level, because I feel like that's where we are right now and talking about Millennium Alliance. There's so many different industries that Hammerspace provides value for. And just curious, just straight off the bat of why you already mentioned, Molly, there's a ton of technology solutions that are kind of popping up everywhere these days. So why do enterprises typically select Hammerspace? I know it's a standout name alone, but the technology is also what people are looking for.
Yeah, certainly. And you can really summarize it, kind of bring it to a specific point of why we're selected is every enterprise who has large data sets, you could call it big data, but large data sets has been on a journey to hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, moving data architectures to take advantage of new technologies in different locations. And one of the biggest challenges they have is running a hybrid cloud is very manual and cumbersome when it comes to getting access to the data set. If you have a data set created in one location, let's just say it's an S3 region in LA, and you want to use it in your data center in London or in your Google Cloud in South Africa, getting the data where you want to compute or have a engineer or user have access to it is really challenging. So hybrid cloud deployments, there's a lot of time spent on, well, shoot, I love the idea of some other technology that's not local to my data, but I don't know how to get my data to it. Or if I do, I have to open an IT ticket. It's going to take, a few days for IT to get the ticket resolved, maybe a few more days for the data to move. And then I realized, oh gosh, I don't even have the complete data set because part of it was somewhere else. Hybrid cloud deployments are cumbersome. And anyone who is touching the hybrid cloud deployments in their organization, I think would nod their heads and agree. Hammerspace simplifies actually accomplishing what you want with your hybrid cloud. Use the apps, use the compute, have remote resource humans where you want them, and we'll make a single data set with a global namespace and a global file system available for everyone to collaborate, everyone to share the data, and to get it to where it's needed. So you can imagine any enterprise who has a hybrid cloud initiative, there's a fit for Hammerspace if you have fairly large or actively used data sets. Any organization who's now embarking on, whether you call it enterprise HPC or have an AI initiative where you need access to GPU computing and you're trying to use data sets that already exist with compute that's somewhere else, that's a great fit for Hammerspace. And that's where we get brought in across verticals and use cases in kind of a general sort of way.
Building a little bit off the companies that are using Hammerspace, I would like to know a little bit more about your audience and sort of the
Oh, sure.
types of companies within those industries that are using that Hammerspace global data platform.
Yeah, you bet. So it's kind of fun. We have a big gaming company. So Epic Games and Three Lateral, the folks who, do Unreal Engine and a lot of the games like Fortnite that gamers are familiar with, run on Hammerspace because they have developed around the world development that's occurring. So they want to hand off a developer project as India goes to sleep and, Singapore is waking up and so on. And so they use us for around the world development. And that's really cool because it's a very active grab information, bugs, how a gamer is using data yesterday, roll it into code for tomorrow. Like it's a very real time development environment, and that's super cool. Meta in Llama 2, Llama 3 training uses Hammerspace to feed, I think they're up to 32, 34,000 GPUs, and needed to be able to do it running on standard-based infrastructure. Meta infamously is using OCP hardware, standard-based hardware, and yet they needed this extreme performance to their GPUs, and they use this for large language model training. And then as you think about kind of just more general enterprises, I think 4 out of 5 of the world's largest telcos are using us because they have data centers in so many locations, and being able to share data sets instead of them being isolated is really valuable to their time to insights on data. I can give you probably a whole bunch, government from the perspective of supercomputing, like Los Alamos National Labs, who always has a supercomputer, and the world's largest top 20 supercomputers uses Hammerspace, not just for feeding the supercomputer, the data sets to the supercomputer, but there's something called the tri-labs, so national labs throughout the United States that are sharing data sets for nuclear research and things of the sort. They use us for the sharing of data. So kind of you can really go across the board that anyone with large data sets, video, audio, images in particular, tend to be difficult to share because they're large files and tough to move around. Those industries really rely on Hammerspace, as well as those who now are trying to get data to remote compute and this kind of GPU NVIDIA craze that's going on.
Yeah, true. I mean, those are a lot of big names, and just incredible that what you're able to do, and something that there's definitely something that topics that are people are talking about all the time now across verticals. One of them is AI. I feel like I'm doing a podcast. I don't know about you, but always mentioning AI in the chat. So I say AI enters the chat here, and where's where's AI right now in
Yeah.
within Hammerspace, and is it really considering that kind of like moving to the cloud and migrating to the cloud, there's so many different levels that you could be at. But where is AI in Hammerspace? And is it a big driver right now in your customers' use of the product?
It's a good question. It's, I think, on everyone's mind that they at least want to be prepared for, I say, and I quote, AI, because they may not even know quite what that means within their organization yet. They may be preparing for. We have quite a few customers who are trying to get their data out of a SaaS environment so that they have access to their data for other analytical initiatives. So it's a broad range, but I'll kind of summarize. I mean, of course, I mentioned Meta. We're in the large language model training business, but not a lot of companies are. I mean, that's a little bit of a corner case. Interesting because it shows the capability of a technology at a really massive scale. But if you think about more traditional enterprise, the Fortune 500, we find they are trying to prepare their data sets so that they can do AI, whether they're doing AI right now or not. They are very well aware, and there's budgeted projects today on, okay, I need to figure out which data I have, which data I might want to use, so that if I am going to go train a model or I am going to do a Gen AI task, I have access to the data sets to do that. So kind of preparing your data and preparing your data architecture is very active. And organizations are trying to learn what is the best way to do that, because they can't just go ask their friends at the local financial services conference, what did you do and what worked? Because nobody's been doing it for that long, really. Some have, AI has been around for a while. So we spent a lot of time just with AI readiness. And then if you're ready to pull the trigger and actually do AI, whether it's large language model training or orchestrating data to a remote compute job, whatever it is, those are kind of the two areas that customers actually are using us today in AI.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of good points, Molly, and I think that AI readiness is more of where companies are at right now, just because,
Mm-hmm.
of course, you mentioned it, AI has been around for quite some time, but it hasn't been around like it is right now. And I think that's why,
Yeah.
especially on that enterprise level.
And I would
So,
say there's a
yeah,
term that customers seem to be using a lot. You hear it at conferences, you hear them saying it in architectural discussions of they need to design for flexibility because they don't know how things are going to be running in 2 years. And so that ability to design for flexibility where, maybe I don't invest $10 million in GPUs that it turns out I can't even keep busy. Or maybe I'm not going to use Model X, I'm going to use Model Y, or the model I'm going to ultimately
Mm.
use doesn't even exist today. They don't know. So having the
True.
ability to put your money into something that you can flexibly move your data around, use different infrastructure, different locations is really valuable to kind of, insurance for yourself as an architect or the person spending money today, and also protecting your company's, spend, that you don't make a big OPEX investment or CapEx investment in something today that isn't actually what you need a year from now.
Well, those are that's awesome. I think I want to get into everything that you just mentioned. And I think we'll start by, just being in marketing, the product so well. I think that kind of gets under the rug a little bit when it comes to usually always the salespeople that know the product the best. I don't think that's true. I think it's the marketing side and the product side. So when it comes to benefits and kind of discussing benefits, and this is a fun part because everybody wants to know what the true benefits are. You mentioned something about, the real time element aspect is so important. But curious on your end as the SVP of marketing about the benefits that when they implement Hammerspace technology, what they're really the value and the benefits that they're getting from it, especially when they're moving away from like that legacy infrastructure.
Yeah, it's try to paraphrase it down to something appropriate for the length of this podcast. There's a few things you can think about. Companies invest in technology to either save money or make money. I think generally that's why you're doing it. Sometimes, it's for risk tolerance, but then you're trying to save money and protect the business. But let's just kind of take the thesis of save money or make money. Some organizations, I think it's a small number. I think we've all read the same reports on, it's single digit as far as who's using AI to make money today. It exists for sure. Um, and Hammerspace is used to help enable AI initiatives. So you can get access to as many GPUs as you want right now, no matter where they sit, with the data set you have. When you expand out, that's not just AI, that's enterprise HPC, financial services, organizations who are doing things like, model testing for investment in the stock market, things like that, real-time trading. So there's definitely make money reasons that people use Hammerspace, but there's a huge save money piece too that historically, and you use the term moving from legacy infrastructure to something more modern, that's super stressful to an enterprise who says, I plan to use my infrastructure for 5 years, 7 years when I invest in it. I can't just go throw that away when I'm only 2 years into the cycle just because I have some new initiative in AWS or in the cloud or whatever it might be. So one of the great things about Hammerspace is you can use the infrastructure you have today or software that lays on top of your existing, whatever it is, Dell, NetApp, AWS, Supermicro, whatever it is. And you can take advantage of the benefits of our software of this global file system namespace with data orchestration to put the data where you want and use the infrastructure you have today. So you can do the cool new thing, design for flexibility, and use the infrastructure you have. Alternatively, we might be competing against somebody who's good at performance for GPUs or something like that, but you have to go in and buy a whole new kit to do it. You have to buy all new memory and servers and infrastructure. And essentially for that job, you now have to do a data migration to the new technology, which could take downtime for the organization, take weeks to do. And you're kind of throwing away the investment you made. And that can be a little embarrassing to explain to the organization why you spend $5 million on something that turns out you don't need. So there's a saving money capability inside to the technology as well. And then ultimately you can be a part of that next new thing when that new model comes out, or when you want to embrace having remote users, which most organizations already have done. You can empower them to work in a real-time way, no matter where they sit or where the software is located.
Well, the benefits sure sound awesome. And if I'm a buyer right now, I would assume that with great benefits, then it comes immediately the cost question. And I think it would be good to touch upon. You mentioned
Sure.
spend. and just how does Hammerspace help really optimize budget, especially in the CapEx and the OpEx spend, while really enabling organizations to use those capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're software. You buy us on a per capacity basis. The more data you have, the less you pay per gigabyte for software, and data under management is our model. The way you save money, build us into a budget, is the data sets and infrastructure you use today, you can use immediately in Hammerspace. So all of your data, you just do what we call metadata assimilation. And within literally seconds, your petabytes of data that are sitting on different infrastructure, we've assimilated the metadata into our environment. And it can then now be used for global data movement, global collaboration, things like that. When you want to do a project, which is using data sets that maybe are in your Isilon in New York City, but you want to do a project somewhere else on some other infrastructure, you effectively immediately can do it. So the time to doing work is extremely fast. And you don't have to invest in new technology until you're really ready for performance or capacity reasons. So you can imagine, depending on who's listening to the podcast or who we're talking to, sometimes it's a CIO who has initiatives they're preparing for next year. Sometimes it's companies like Jellyfish Pictures, who is a visual effects studio, who gets a call today saying, hey, Netflix wants you to do the animation on a show, and we need that project done in 10 days. Can you take the job or not? And then they scramble and say, do I have enough artists? Do I have enough compute power for rendering? With Hammerspace, the answer is always yes, because they can use artists, and they do, and throughout Africa, throughout Europe, throughout the US. And if there's not compute available local to them in London, which is where they're located, no problem. They can compute in Vancouver or wherever it is to get the GPUs for rendering. So sometimes business initiatives are immediate, and I want to be able to take that job for Netflix right now instead of some other studio taking it. Sometimes they're longer term, as far as a go to the cloud initiative or get away from the cloud initiative or whatever it is, and we're a key part of that as well.
I mean, so Molly, this has been such a great chat, and I before I let you go, I think it'd be a fun thing to discuss sort of what really leads to a follow-up meeting. You come to the Millennium Alliance event, you meet with X amount of executives who are interested in using Hammerspace and using this type of technology. And so when you meet with them at the assembly and the attendees are interested, what is the key topic of the discussion that sort of gets them to be following up with you and have that follow-up meeting, and have their teams sort of convene after the event to think about buying and think about implementing this type of technology and bringing Hammerspace on as a partner?
Yeah, I think that our experience when we were in Atlanta at the Millennium Alliance event earlier this year was we map to a lot of C-suite initiatives. Sometimes it's AI, sometimes it's security, sometimes it's cloud readiness. There's different C-suite initiatives. And when we have the conversation, what tends to be the follow-up meeting is, let me get you to the team who is responsible for AI data architectures or IT infrastructure, and make sure that they're aware of your capabilities. So the follow-up meeting usually is someone in their organization that's responsible for the initiative, which is at that kind of C-suite level. And ultimately, it's a conversation because it is a different way of doing things. People largely are accustomed to designing their strategies around infrastructure. It's infrastructure driven. My infrastructure, my server, my storage, my network can go this big, this fast, and has this IO pattern. Okay, I need something different for a workflow. I'm going to go buy some other custom infrastructure. That's no longer the case. Now you can take your global data environment and move the data to the location that has the appropriate IO patterns. And so it's really breaking some paradigms of the way people design. So the follow-up meeting usually is educational, with the technical team working on architectures and strategies for one of those types of initiatives.
That's terrific. Well, I mean, I think all of those questions we could have dove in like been talked about for an hour. So I feel like
Yeah,
we
I
moved
tried to
that.
be concise. I may have been a little too verbose, but I tried.
No, not at all. For the sake of time, and I mean, I feel like we move so fast. We're using Hammerspace, and I feel like data in motion on right now. So Molly, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and recording your podcast, Data Unchained, to jump on Millennium's podcast and have that additional reach out for our audience and for our members to really get to know Hammerspace and everything that it has to offer. So I appreciate you. Maybe we'll do a part two to this and dive into some of those key topics and key areas that we were discussing today. And to those who are listening, and especially in our data and AI and those that are the CTOs and CIOs trying to conquer their digital endeavors for the enterprise. Thank you for your continued listenership. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Connor.